It is Tuesday. Y'all know what time it is. We're about to dive into the waiver wires, and I'm going to lay out every single move you need to make this week to go win your leagues. We're going to be in sleeper, going through the trending up list, position by position, looking at guys who are rostered in 50% of leagues or less. And I'm just going to be telling you if you should be adding these guys or if you should just let your teammates blow their fab on them. And then we're going to go through the trending down list and briefly touch on guys who can be cut to make room on your rosters and guys who you should continue to hold for another week or two. So we're going to start at the running back position. The running back position is the juiciest position on this week's waivers, and that's because we saw a lot of injuries in week 8, and the biggest injury was Cam Scadaboo going down with an ankle injury. He just had surgery on that ankle, and they haven't officially came out and said he's going to be out for the season, but based on that gruesome injury, I think it's pretty safe to say that he is going to be out for the season. And that means Tyron Tracy steps in as the starter. Tyron Tracy, as a rookie last season, was electric. He had 1,000 all-purpose yards and just looked dynamic on the field. I did think he'd see more work this year, even with Scadaboo out there. But Scadaboo completely took over and Tyron Tracy took a back seat. But now Tyron Tracy's back in the driver's seat. And I think he is going to ball out with this electric Jackson Dart offense. He can catch the ball. He can run the ball. And Tyron Tracy is the number one target and the biggest must-add on this week's waivers. So with Tyron Tracy, I would blow 40% or more of my fab. It's rare where you see a running back of Cam Scadaboo's level go down for the rest of the season. And when that happens, those are the guys you need to go all in for and grab on the waiver wires. So Tyron Tracy, easily the number one ad this week. There's no caveats with them. I would go all in. And then another player we saw get injured in that game was Saquon Barkley. I do think Saquon Barkley is going to be back after their week 9 bye and just be fine. He had a groin injury. They say it's nothing crazy, but again, you never know. And when a guy like Saquon Barkley does go down on a dynamic Eagles offense, you do want to pick up his backup, who is Tank Bigsby. If you're a Saquon Barkley owner, I think you have to pick up Tank Bigsby, and I'll spend 10-ish% of my fab. But again, I don't think Saquon's going to miss time beyond this bye week. So if you're not a Saquon Barkley owner, I would still probably dabble with 5% of my fab. He just needs to be rostered in the case that Saquon does miss time, because then you're immediately putting him into your lineups. We've seen him have success in the past in Jacksonville, and he just needs to be rostered. And then moving on to Devin Singletary, who is the backup to Tyron Tracy. Devin Singletary is going to see more work now as this RB2, but he doesn't offer that same upside that Tyron Tracy does. Devin Singletary is not someone you need to be putting any fab on. If you have the extra roster space and you can't pick up Tyron Tracy, I would maybe stash Devin Singletary in case we see a 50-50 backfield split or just something crazy where Tyron Tracy isn't getting the ball as much as we think he is, but I don't think that's very likely. So don't be going out there throwing a lot of fab on Singletary, but hey, he should still be rostered until we see what this Giants offense looks like without Scadaboo. Dylan Sampson is a very interesting one. Judkins got hurt. It's a shoulder injury. Like Saquon, he has a week 9 bye. I do think he's going to return in week 10. They said he's day-to-day as of right now, but you never know with these kind of injuries. And if you're a Judkins owner like Saquon, you're going to want to pick up Dylan Sampson for about 10% of your fab. And if you don't have Judkins, again, I would still probably spend 5%. I would definitely spend 5%, but I'd go up to 10% of my fab to stash him in case Judkins does miss time. Bucky Irving's injury, he had a different shoulder injury and he had an ankle injury, but they also were like, he's day-to-day, he's not going to miss a lot of time, and then he's missing a lot of weeks. So if we see a situation like that, we saw what Dylan Sampson could do without Judkins in the first 2 weeks, putting up double-digit points and going crazy in week 1. And their first game out the bye is the Jets, and then they play the Raiders in week 12. So if Judkins were to miss time, Dylan Sampson is an immediate RB2, and I think he needs to be rostered for sure. Emmanuel Wilson, we're not really going to touch on. He does have a good matchup against Carolina next week, but Josh Jacobs is that guy in Green Bay getting all the snaps, so we don't really need to pick up Emmanuel Wilson. Bam Knight, Trey Benson is not going to play in week 9, so Bam Knight probably has one more good week in him against a very bad Dallas defense. If you need a running back this week because you have guys on bye or injuries or anything like that, Bam Knight is a good pickup for 5-10% of your fab, but I wouldn't expect much more out of Bam Knight following this week, considering Trey Benson should be back. You still have Michael Carter, who's going to eat into his carries even this week, but Bam Knight is a good pickup just if you need a running back to stream essentially in week 9. Samaje Perine, I mean, he had a good week. We're not going to, he's an old, no disrespect, he's old. We're like, Chase Brown's a starter. He's not going to see another 17-point week, I don't think, the rest of the season. He can stay on the waivers. Isaiah Davis, I've been saying, needs to be picked up. You're going to have to probably pay up a little bit more this week. I'd say maybe 5-10% of your fab this week. Isaiah Davis is interesting because you're not going to start him any given week, most likely. But Breece Hall is a really strong trade candidate this year because the Jets are a one-win team. You have a running back who you haven't paid yet, and you could get a good return for Breece Hall. So there is a really strong possibility they do trade Breece Hall, especially after he went nuclear with 3 touchdowns this week. That would put Isaiah Davis in as a starter. And if he is starting, even though it's a terrible Jets team, he's still at least flex worthy. So I think Isaiah Davis is a really good stash if you have the roster spot. And I think he needs to be stashed in every league that's at least 12 people plus. Kareem Hunt, really good week on Monday night. Again, the Chiefs' backfield's weird. It kind of just comes down to which guy has the hot hand. It was Kareem Hunt this week. So, I mean, he should be rostered, but you're not like, you can't be starting him consistently with a lot of optimism. So it's kind of a weird situation, you know? And the rest of these guys, Tajay Spears is, when I look at Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears for the rest of the season, I have Tajay Spears up here and Tony Pollard down here. This Titans offense is already not good, so these running backs don't get a lot of scoring opportunities. Tajay Spears brings a more promising skill set for fantasy purposes with his ability as a receiving back, and we saw that this week where he had a really solid week with 17 points. I would pick up Tajay Spears. He needs to be rostered. I think he can put up flex-worthy numbers the rest of the season if the Titans continue to give him more work over Tony Pollard. Ollie Gordon had a really good week, but he's still behind Achane, and he's nothing more than a handcuff at this time. Looking at the receivers, Shamir DK has put together back-to-back good weeks with the absence of Calvin Ridley. If Calvin Ridley continues to miss time, Shamir DK should continue to see productive weeks. And honestly, like Breece Hall, I think Calvin Ridley is a strong trade candidate. Again, this is a one-win team that needs to plan for the future. Calvin Ridley has been super underwhelming for the Titans this year. I think another team could utilize him better and give him more work. So I could see Calvin Ridley getting traded and then Shamir DK kind of continuing to do what he's doing now. I don't think we're going to see him put up 16 points every week. But again, with Ridley out and with, I think, a potential trade involving Ridley, I think DK needs to be rostered. I would probably spend like 10% of my fab on him. I wouldn't go crazy. Again, this is the Titans offense. With the rookie Cam Ward, they're still figuring out a lot of things. I don't think he's a league winner by any means, but he should be rostered based on what we saw these last 2 weeks. Xavier Hutchinson went off this week with Nico Collins out. I think this one's fool's gold, in my opinion. I think if you're going to go out and grab Texans receivers on the waivers this week, it should be Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins, the rookies, and especially Jalen Noel, who's had 3 consistent weeks of production. Even with Nico Collins in, Jalen Noel saw some solid double-digit weeks. So that's the guy I would be adding. If Nico Collins were to miss another week, I think Xavier Hutchinson could be worth starting next week. But for the upside for the rest of the season, I'd be looking to stash a guy like Jalen Noel or Jaden Higgins, who I don't think will cost you more than 5% of your fab, if even that. Troy Franklin is a guy that needs to be stashed. He just keeps seeing his targets go up, and Bo Nix is heating up. So with what we saw this week, 26.9 points, I think Troy Franklin definitely warrants being added. And I would probably I'd spend 10% of my fab on him. I don't think we're going to be starting him every week, but if this trend continues and he's putting up 10 plus points, he will be at least flex worthy for the rest of the season. Roman Wilson, I think, is a one-off. We don't need to be adding him. Khalil Shakir, 80%. Christian Watson. The Packers receivers are kind of they don't offer that upside with Tucker Kraft and Josh Jacobs out there. They're kind of carrying this offense. And I think the highest upside guy in that receiving room is still Matthew Golden. I wouldn't be going crazy over Christian Watson. Malik Washington, I said last week, he needs to be rostered. He's just such a good gadget guy that translates well for fantasy. And you could probably pick him up for like 5-ish% of your fab. If you have the roster spot on your bench, I would pick him up. Again, Waddle's out, or Tyreek Hill's out, and Waller's out. So Waddle's the only real receiving option. Malik Washington proved worthy this week with, again, a good fantasy week as well. So I would definitely have him stashed. Trey Tucker, he should be stashed on benches. Josh Downs is already past 50%. Jacoby Myers past 50%. Quarterback and tight ends pretty barren this week. I mean, there's not a lot of guys here who aren't rostered. I don't know, like Darnold should be rostered in most leagues. He's been putting together a really solid season. JJ McCarthy's returning next week, and he is available in a lot of leagues. I feel like people dropped him while he was out. I think if you're playing 2 quarterback leagues and superflex leagues, I doubt JJ McCarthy's out there. But if you are, you need to go pick him up. And if you have an extra roster spot in a regular redraft league and you only have 1 quarterback who might have a bye week coming up, JJ McCarthy is potentially worth adding in case he does figure it out in this Vikings offense. And tight ends, there wasn't much here on Sleeper. All these guys are rostered in 50% of leagues or more. But a guy to watch out for is Jawan Johnson. He's at like 46% rostered, or maybe even lower in the 30s. But people seem to forget how good he was last year and how good he was for the first couple weeks of the year. And he's starting to heat back up. He's had double-digit performances for fantasy the last 2 weeks. And with Tyler Shaw coming in now, he might rely heavier on Jawan Johnson. If you need to stream a tight end this week or just need a backup tight end, Jawan Johnson is definitely worth rostering. He was like the tight end 3 at one point, like 3 weeks through the season. So thus all the trending up players. We'll go through the trending down. Quarterbacks, Kirk Cousins cut. Carson Wentz after the season cut. Joe Flacco, I would not cut him. I don't know why he's trending down. Mariota, I mean, I think Jaden Daniels is probably going to miss another week, but Mariota doesn't really offer that kind of crazy upside. But again, if you're playing in 2 quarterback leagues or super flex leagues, keep him around. Caleb Williams has been disappointing these last few weeks, but you're not going to cut him. I think if he has another bad 2 weeks, he's worth cutting. But he has honestly a solid start this week against the Bengals in what is a get-right game. If you can't figure it out against the Bengals, I would start to consider cutting him for sure. A Rattler probably cut. Tyler Shaw's coming in now. Quarterback situation's going to get messy over there in New Orleans. Justin Fields actually went off this week and looked good. I would not cut him. They have a bye week coming up this week. Then they play the Browns. I wouldn't expect fireworks from the Jets offense like that every week, and maybe not the rest of the year, but Justin Fields is probably worth keeping around. But if you need, since he is on a bye, if you need room on your roster this week, you can go ahead and cut Justin Fields. I don't think it's going to lose you your league by any means. Aaron Rodgers will keep around. Running backs, Brashard Smith wasn't there that involved because Kareem Hunt was just the hot hand in week 8 on Monday night. I would keep Brashard Smith if you have the roster space for another week. He's showed his upside last week and the week before, so I still like what he brings to the table. Kyle Monangai, I mean, people kind of overreacted last week, going crazy, blowing their fab on him. He was still involved this week, but DeAndre Swift is the RB1 on this team, and he's been having a really good year. Monangai is kind of just going to come in and get snaps, and unless he gets a touchdown or a big play here and there, he's not going to be fantasy relevant. Honestly, if I had him and I had to go pick up a guy like Tyron Tracy, or even someone like we discussed, actually, maybe like someone like Troy Franklin, I would probably cut Kyle Monangai, but again, it depends on your running back situation and your team's needs. Kenneth Gainwell, I wouldn't cut. He had a bad week, but he's been a pretty dependent bench handcuff kind of guy. Michael Carter, I would keep, and honestly, he's a sleeper for me next week against the Dallas defense. Again, I think he's going to cut into Bam Knights or eat into Bam Knights carries and could have a decent 8+ point week. Justice Hill can be cut. Cam Scadaboo, unfortunately, can be cut. Isaiah Pacheco, I wouldn't cut. JCM, I wouldn't cut, but he's going to be a big boom or bust guy the rest of the season. I've been saying this for 2 weeks. When he booms, he booms. When he busts, he busts, but you can't cut him. Son Haskins, I'd cut. Jordan Mason, you're not going to cut. Algier can be cut if you need the roster space, but I mean, if you have an empty spot on your bench, you can keep him around as a good handcuff. Tony Pollard, again, I wouldn't cut, but I do prefer Tajay Spears over him. Wide receivers, Darnell Mooney. The Falcons are just kind of weird and a mess. I wouldn't cut them, but if you need to cut them to make room for someone like, again, Tyron Tracy, I'd go ahead and cut him. Marvin Mims, I mean, you can cut. Jerry Jeudy, you can cut. I mean, like, this Browns, Dylan Gabriel isn't sustaining any of these receivers. He's sustaining the tight ends, but he can't sustain Jerry Jeudy. I would seriously cut him if you need to pick up someone like Tyron Tracy. Sterling Shepard, you can likely cut. Matthew Golden, you're not going to cut. Keon Coleman, I would keep, but he's just not what we saw in week 1. Calvin Austin, I would cut. Kendrick Bourne, I would maybe keep around, but once Pearsall comes back, he can definitely be cut. Romeo Dobbs, I would keep. Luther Burden just suffered a concussion. I would keep if you have the space because he was promising. Right now, the issue is Caleb Williams isn't really feeding his guys. He finally got Rome involved this week, but other than that, he hasn't really been feeding his guys like we saw before the bye week. So you can cut him, but I would keep him around if you can. Again, Trey Tucker, we're going to keep around. Io Manor is a good stash. Tez Johnson, definitely stash. Tight ends, Cade Otton. If you need to pick up a tight end stream this week, you can cut him. Darren Waller, you can cut him, but we saw the upside with him. So if you can keep him around, maybe keep him around. Evan Ingram, he's been decent. He's a tough one. If you cut him, I don't think people are going to be jumping on the waiver wires to get him. But if you can keep him, you can keep him as your backup. Zach Ertz, we're not cutting. Jonnu Smith can be cut, and then Michael Mayer can be cut. So that is the waiver wires for this week. Week 9 coming up. We're like midway through the season now. Hopefully y'all can go out there and get the guys you need to get. And thank you for tuning in. I will catch y'all later.